night my uncle died, everyone in the house fell asleep beside his corpse. But by midnight, we realized something far worse. They weren't sleeping. Something inside the house had stolen their consciousness. And the only person still awake was a pregnant woman locked alone beside the prayer room window. Hello, friends. I'm Shivraj, and tonight's story is not just another village ghost tale. This incident was whispered about for decades in a remote Indian village where people feared one thing more than death itself: the night of Amavasya, a moonless night when, according to the elders, the dead do not stay dead, and whatever roams outside should never be invited in. My name is Karen, and this happened in my village sometime around 1974 or 1975 in a forgotten corner of Gonia district. Back then, there were no proper roads, no electricity, no vehicles. Just a tiny settlement hidden deep inside endless fields and jungle. Only 10 or 15 houses existed there. And after sunset, the village became a graveyard. By 8 p.m., every door would shut. No footsteps, no lanterns, no voices. Even the dogs stopped barking after dark, as if they too feared what moved through the night. But that Amavasya was different. The silence felt alive. From evening itself, something was wrong. The air felt heavy, suffocating, almost poisonous. The village dogs, usually barking nonstop at dusk, suddenly hid beneath carts and refused to come out. Cows tied in the sheds kept groaning nervously, pulling against their ropes as if they sensed an invisible predator nearby. That night, 3 brothers lived together in one old mud house at the edge of the village. The youngest uncle was around 35 and unmarried. The middle and eldest brothers both had families, and the eldest already had grown children nearly 20 years old. Before sunset, the youngest uncle warned everyone again and again. After 7, nobody steps outside tonight. No matter what you hear, nobody laughed at him, because everyone in the village knew certain Amavasya nights carried an evil older than memory. Dinner ended early. The women cleaned utensils inside while the men sat in the veranda, talking softly under the weak glow of an oil lamp. The darkness outside the house looked unnatural, as if the entire world beyond the doorway had disappeared. Then suddenly, around 8:30 p.m., the youngest uncle grabbed his chest. At first he laughed it off, saying it was probably acidity. He stood up and began pacing slowly toward the inner room. But seconds later, thud, a horrifying sound echoed through the house. They rushed inside and found him collapsed on the floor, eyes half open, body stiff, as though he had seen something terrifying before dying. Someone ran to call the village healer. Others rubbed his hands, splashed water on his face, begged him to wake up. But his body was already turning cold. When the old Vade finally arrived, he checked the pulse once, then quietly stepped back. "He's gone," he whispered. "His soul has already left the body." And with those words, fear entered the house. Neighbors gathered quickly, but nobody dared stay too long. It was Amavasya. According to village custom, carrying a dead body outside during the moonless night invited disaster upon the entire village. So the corpse had to remain inside until sunrise. A dirty white sheet was placed over the uncle's body in the middle of the hall. Near his head, a small clay oil lamp flickered weakly, throwing trembling shadows across the walls. Then another problem arose. The middle brother's wife was 8 months pregnant. The elders believed that the shadow of a corpse falling upon a pregnant woman could attract wandering spirits toward the unborn child. So they locked her inside the small prayer room at the corner of the house. The room had only one tiny window covered by a thick cloth curtain. "Do not open the curtain," they warned her. "And no matter what happens tonight, do not come outside." At first, the house remained full of people. Relatives whispered prayers. Women cried softly, but slowly, one by one, the neighbors left, promising to return before sunrise. By 11 p.m., only the family remained, and then the impossible began. The silence inside the house deepened unnaturally. No coughing, no whispers, not even breathing could be heard clearly anymore. One by one, everyone sitting around the dead body began to drift into sleep. Or at least, that's what they thought. By midnight, every single person in the hall had collapsed into a strange frozen state. One man's hand remained half raised in the air. Another sat with his mouth hanging open. Someone's neck twisted at an unnatural angle, as if their body had stopped moving mid-sentence. None of them shifted. None of them blinked. Only their chests moved slightly up and down, proving they were still alive. It was not sleep. It was as if something had paralyzed the entire house. The tiny oil lamp beside the corpse continued flickering violently, casting moving shadows across their frozen faces. And inside the prayer room, the pregnant woman was the only person still awake. At first, she thought everyone had simply fallen asleep from exhaustion. But then she noticed something terrifying. The entire village outside had gone silent too. No crickets, no dogs, no wind, nothing. It felt as though the whole world had stopped breathing. Her heart began pounding. Slowly, trembling, she stepped toward the tiny covered window of the prayer room. And from the other side of the curtain, she heard someone whisper her name. The pregnant woman slowly pulled back the curtain covering the tiny prayer room window. What she saw on the other side froze the blood in her veins. The dead body still lay in the center of the hall beneath the white sheet. Around it, the entire family remained collapsed in unnatural positions. Nobody looked peacefully asleep. One man's arm hung, twisted backward. Another's head leaned at an impossible angle. Someone's mouth was stretched wide open as if they had stopped breathing mid-scream. Even her husband, Ajay, lay crumpled in the corner like a discarded corpse. At first, she thought they had fainted from exhaustion and grief. But the longer she stared, the more wrong it felt. This was not sleep. It looked like an entire battalion had been silently neutralized in the middle of the night without a single struggle. Her throat went dry. In a trembling whisper, she called toward her husband. Ajay, can you hear me? Ajay, wake up. And then, the white sheet covering the corpse moved. Just slightly. A slow shift. Like a dead soldier turning over after hearing his name called from the battlefield. The woman instantly froze. Inside her womb, the baby that had been kicking constantly moments earlier suddenly went completely still, as if even the unborn child sensed something unnatural awakening in that room. She quickly pulled the curtain closed, leaving only the tiniest gap to look through. And then she saw it again. Movement. The corpse slowly raised one shoulder beneath the sheet. Then, inch by inch, the dead man pushed the cloth aside and sat upright. Its eyes were open, but there were no pupils. Only white, pure white. The trembling flame of the oil lamp reflected inside those empty eyes like fire burning across snow. The woman bit down hard on the edge of her sari to stop herself from screaming. Her legs refused to move. Her entire body felt paralyzed, as if terror itself had wrapped chains around her chest. Then the corpse stood up. Its feet touched the floor without making a sound. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing. It drifted through the hall like a shadow moving through smoke. Slowly, the dead man bent down over each unconscious family member one by one, studying their faces from inches away. Those white eyes stared into them, as though identifying targets before an execution. It leaned over the eldest brother, then the children, then the women, then her husband. Every movement was calm, deliberate, almost ritualistic, as if this entire operation had been planned long before that night. Then suddenly, the corpse turned toward the prayer room. Toward her, the woman's heartbeat nearly exploded in her chest. The dead thing moved silently across the hall until it stood directly outside the locked door. Now only a thin wooden barrier separated them. Inside the room, the pregnant woman pressed herself against the wall, covering her mouth with both hands. Her eyes shut tightly. Her lips trembled nonstop. She was certain the door would burst open at any second. But it didn't. 5 seconds passed. 10. The corpse simply stood there motionless, listening, waiting. The silence felt heavier than death itself. Then slowly, it turned away. The woman finally released a breath she had been holding. But the nightmare was far from over. The corpse walked toward a wooden peg fixed into the wall where old clothes and ropes were hanging. It reached out and grabbed a long cord made of twisted jute. Then it returned to the unconscious family members and began tying knots, one knot for each person, slowly, carefully, methodically, the way a commander marks soldiers already chosen for death. First knot, one victim. Second knot, another victim. Third, fourth, fifth. The woman watched in horror as the corpse continued for nearly an hour, moving from body to body beneath the flickering oil lamp. And all the while, its lips kept moving silently. No sound came out, but it looked as though the dead man was whispering each person's name while tightening every knot. By the time it finished, the rope was filled with knots, 12 in total, 12 lives bound together. Then came the part that haunted the woman forever. The corpse lifted the rope toward its mouth and began swallowing it, slowly, 1 inch at a time. Its throat stretched unnaturally as the rope disappeared inside its body. Thick veins pulsed along its neck. A wet, choking sound echoed through the hall. A horrible mixture of groaning, laughing, and suffocating breaths. The woman nearly collapsed watching it. The rope kept sliding deeper and deeper into the corpse's mouth until the final knot vanished inside. Then suddenly, crack, the corpse snapped its neck violently toward the prayer room window. Straight at her, those white eyes locked onto the tiny opening in the curtain. For one horrifying second, it looked directly into her eyes. The woman's body shook uncontrollably. Her blood felt ice cold. She stopped breathing completely, terrified that even the sound of her heartbeat would give her away. Then, just as suddenly, the corpse turned back toward the hall. It calmly walked to its original place, laid down on the floor again, pulled the white sheet over itself, and became motionless once more, exactly like before, as if nothing had ever happened. The oil lamp continued flickering beside the body while the house drowned once again in deadly silence. But inside the prayer room, the pregnant woman remained frozen in shock until dawn. Around 4 in the morning, a neighbor finally arrived to check on the family. Brahma Muhurta had already begun, yet the house remained unnaturally quiet. No crying, no movement, no voices. He stepped inside and immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. Every family member still sat or lay against the walls exactly where they had been during the night, trapped in bizarre positions like statues abandoned after some dark ritual. He shook them, called their names. Nothing. By sunrise, the entire village had gathered outside the house. Relatives arrived from nearby villages, but still nobody woke up. 12 people, alive, yet unreachable, breathing, yet completely trapped somewhere beyond consciousness. Fear spread rapidly through the crowd. People whispered that some dark force had entered the house during Amavasya and taken hold of their souls. Soon, a few village elders and spiritual healers were called. The moment they entered the hall, even their faces changed, because they had never seen anything like this before. Then someone remembered the pregnant daughter-in-law locked inside the prayer room. A young niece carefully opened the door. Inside, the woman sat trembling in the corner, wide awake, but broken. Her eyes stared blankly at the wall, as if her mind had never returned from whatever she witnessed that night. When they tried speaking to her, she gave no response. Only after water was sprinkled on her face did she slowly regain enough strength to talk. And with a shaking voice, she told them everything. The dead body rising, the white eyes, the knots, the rope, the swallowing, every horrifying detail. Most people refused to believe her, until one of the elders quietly said, "If the corpse truly swallowed the rope, then open its mouth." The corpse's jaw had locked shut so tightly that nobody could force it open. Its teeth were clenched like iron. The villagers gathered around the body in complete silence, while the oil lamp beside the corpse continued flickering weakly, throwing long shadows across the walls. Fear had already spread through the entire house like poison. Nobody wanted to touch the dead man, but nobody had the courage to leave either. Finally, one of the old Vaids stepped forward. With trembling hands, he poured a bitter herbal liquid into the corpse's mouth. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, a soft cracking sound echoed from the jaw. The dead man's mouth loosened slightly. One of the elders immediately pushed his hand inside, searching desperately for the rope the pregnant woman had described. But after reaching deep into the mouth, he found nothing. The villagers exchanged nervous glances. Had the woman imagined everything? Then the elder pushed his arm even deeper, almost down the corpse's throat. And suddenly, his fingers touched something wet. A rope. The moment he grabbed it, the old man's face turned pale. Slowly, very slowly, he began pulling it out. And as the rope emerged inch by inch from inside the corpse's throat, the people standing around realized something horrifying. There were knots tied into it. Many knots. The entire room fell silent. Then the first knot came loose. At that exact moment, one unconscious man gasped violently and opened his eyes. He looked around in confusion, breathing heavily like someone returning from underwater. Sweat covered his body. His eyes were filled with terror, but he remembered nothing clearly. Only one thing. A dark room, he whispered. Someone locked me inside, and something outside kept banging on the door. Before anyone could react, the second knot loosened. Another man suddenly woke up. He began shaking uncontrollably. Thin red marks had appeared around his wrists, as though invisible ropes had been tied around them all night. Then the third knot opened. A woman sat upright and immediately burst into tears. Not normal crying, the kind of crying that comes from a terror too deep for words. She didn't even know why she was crying. She only kept clutching her chest, gasping for breath, as if some crushing weight had finally lifted from her soul. One by one, knot after knot came undone, and with every knot released, another unconscious person woke up. The villagers watched in absolute horror as life slowly returned to the house. But none of the survivors were normal afterward. Their eyes looked hollow, their bodies weak. All of them behaved like soldiers returning from a battlefield they could barely remember, like people who had gone somewhere dark, somewhere no living human was meant to enter. Finally, the last person woke up. The room fell silent again. The rope now hung loose from the corpse's mouth. But then one of the elders frowned. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He counted the people again carefully. 1, 2, 3, 12. Only 12 people had regained consciousness, but there was still one knot left on the rope. The room instantly turned cold. Everyone stared at the final knot in horror. If 12 knots belonged to 12 people, then who did the 13th knot belong to? The villagers questioned everyone who had visited the house that night. Neighbors, relatives, friends, all were alive. All were accounted for. No 13th person existed. And the strangest part was this. Nobody could clearly remember how many people had actually been inside the house during the night. Every time they tried recalling it, their minds became foggy, confused, broken. Some even swore they remembered seeing another figure sitting silently in the corner of the hall during the night. But no one could remember the face. Panic spread rapidly through the village. At last, the elders reached a terrifying conclusion. The final knot did not belong to the living. It belonged to the dead man himself. They believed that if the final knot was opened, whatever had entered that corpse during Amavaja might return again. So they left it tied, forever. Only after that decision did the villagers finally perform the cremation. As the funeral fire burned, the elders warned everyone present. When a person dies, never leave the body unprotected. Tie the toes together. Place holy basil in the mouth. Seal the nostrils with cotton. Because if the body remains open on certain nights, wandering spirits can claim it. After that day, the village was never the same. People stopped stepping outside during Amavaja after sunset. Doors remained locked. Oil lamps burned through the entire night. And parents terrified their children with whispers about the house where the dead had walked among the living. But the story did not end there. A few weeks later, the pregnant daughter-in-law gave birth to a baby boy. Yet the moment the child entered the world, something felt horribly wrong. The baby did not cry. Not once. The room remained silent. The doctor checked the child quickly, confusion spreading across his face. Then, only moments after birth, the baby stopped breathing. Just like that. Gone. When the news spread through the village, The older women lowered their voices and whispered the same terrifying thought to one another. Perhaps the last knot was tied for the unborn child. They believed the child's life had remained connected to the mother all this time. And the moment that final thread separated during birth, the knot finally tightened forever. So friends, that was tonight's story. Tell me honestly in the comments, what would you have done if you were trapped inside that house on Amavaja night, watching a dead body walk among the living? And remember, not every corpse stays lifeless after death. Sometimes, something else wakes up inside it. Good night.